relentless pursuit of social validation is not a manifestation of genuine human empathy, but rather a profound display of biological cowardice that modern society has intentionally mislabeled as a moral virtue. Human beings are evolutionarily wired to associate social rejection with literal physical death, an ancient survival mechanism originating from tribal structures that currently functions as a devastating psychological glitch in the modern hierarchy. Predators operating within these social frameworks actively hunt for this exact psychological vulnerability, immediately detecting a desperate need for external approval and weaponizing it to completely control the objective reality of their targets. The elite top 1% understand this terrifying dynamic with absolute clarity, choosing to operate strictly within a classified behavioral framework that mathematically eliminates the biological need to be liked by anyone. This invisible mental armor permanently protects their central nervous system from external manipulation. But the algorithm is currently suppressing the distribution of this dark psychology, meaning the window of opportunity to internalize this exploit is closing rapidly. If the clinical data presented in this specific analysis is ignored today, the individual actively volunteers to remain a pathetic social puppet, permanently guaranteeing their own psychological slavery at the bottom of the hierarchy. By the exact conclusion of this comprehensive behavioral breakdown, the elite blueprint for absolute emotional sovereignty will be fully exposed, providing the precise psychological leverage required to sever the invisible strings of manipulation. Pay absolute attention to the underlying mechanics of human behavior revealed in the following minutes, because the fundamental perception of social interactions is about to be shattered completely and irreversibly. Every single interaction between human beings operates as an unforgiving, continuous power dynamic where personal status is either actively accumulated or silently bled out into the surrounding environment. Because the human brain still equates uncomfortable social friction with a mortal threat, individuals constantly and frantically adjust their own personalities to avoid any potential conflict, slowly transforming into pathetic social chameleons. This deep-seated terror forces people to openly agree with opinions they secretly despise and laugh nervously at incredibly disrespectful jokes, prioritizing a fake sense of harmony over their own genuine self-respect. This widespread behavioral pattern is never an indicator of high spiritual intelligence or elevated maturity. It is a clinical, undeniable demonstration of psychological weakness that signals absolute submission to the entire room. The predator sitting across the table does not perceive a kind, accommodating peer. They clearly see a terrified, completely obedient puppet whose internal foundation is fragile enough to be dismantled with minimal effort. Every time an individual desperately seeks approval to diffuse tension, they are actively draining their own social value and voluntarily walking into a psychological cage designed entirely by their manipulator. The dark psychology of people pleasers. The dark psychology underlying the behavior of chronic people pleasers is incredibly brutal, primarily because these highly accommodating individuals do not actually harbor genuine love or affection for the people they are constantly serving. In reality, people-pleasing is a covert, highly sophisticated manipulation tactic disguised perfectly as kindness, designed specifically to control the negative emotional reactions of unpredictable individuals within their immediate environment. Acting overly nice is a calculated survival strategy meant to guarantee temporary, fake loyalty and avoid the sudden, violent anger of others, effectively manipulating the social atmosphere through a posture of absolute biological submission. However, this desperate strategy backfires with mathematical, undeniable certainty, because healthy and secure individuals exclusively respect grounded, solid human boundaries rather than the shifting, hollow shell of a social chameleon. A person who constantly alters their core values to match the room cannot be trusted by anyone, and the hierarchy immediately assigns them the lowest possible status upon detecting their extreme desperation for group approval. Covert narcissists, however, view this exact same dynamic through a completely different psychological lens, recognizing the people pleaser as the ultimate, unlimited energy supply for their own fractured and unstable egos. Because manipulators operate on a severe, chronic internal energy deficit, they require a constant, daily harvest of external emotional validation just to survive, making the terrified people pleaser their absolute perfect host. Psychology behind this parasitic relationship is remarkably dark. The people pleaser secretly hates their own identity and relies entirely on external praise, while the narcissist strategically controls the flow of that exact validation. The predator will offer intense, concentrated approval to deeply hook the target's nervous system, only to suddenly and unexpectedly withdraw it completely, throwing the victim's limbic system into a state of absolute primal panic. Regain that fleeting sense of safety, the frantic victim will immediately offer massive, unearned emotional support, completely abandoning their own essential needs and internal moral compass just to stabilize the relationship. This is never a real, balanced friendship built on mutual respect. It is a case of severe clinical emotional parasitism where the victim's mental health pays the ultimate price to fund a massive narcissistic supply. How covert narcissists smell your biological fear. Predators operating within modern social hierarchies do not choose their human victims randomly. They execute a highly systematic predatory selection process every single day based on the micro-expressions and physical behaviors of those around them. Deep biological fear is literally smelled by covert narcissists, as a victim's body language constantly broadcasts their internal terror through nervous, rapid eye contact and a physical posture that instinctively shrinks to avoid perceived threats. Speaking incredibly fast to prevent interruption and attaching a nervous, submissive laugh to the end of every sentence are massive, fatal biological leaks of power that signal extreme social vulnerability to the entire room. Covert manipulators possess a highly calibrated radar for these specific behaviors, deliberately testing the heavy armor of their peers by dropping microscopic social infractions and passive-aggressive insults to closely monitor the physical reaction. Holding firm ground and projecting cold indifference immediately forces the predator to retreat, but forcing a nervous, friendly smile to defuse the heavy tension registers instantly as absolute biological submission. The manipulator's internal system registers a massive, open vulnerability, establishing a permanent energetic pipeline that allows them to weaponize the target's deep-seated fear of social rejection on a daily basis. Maintain this control, the predator will constantly threaten sudden abandonment and utilize the silent treatment as a form of psychological torture, intentionally making the victim feel completely worthless and desperate for reconciliation. Because the human nervous system is so profoundly terrified of isolation, the victim will endure endless hours of psychological abuse and extreme public disrespect, effectively proving to the manipulator that their personal boundaries are entirely fake. People pleaser is actively training the covert narcissist to abuse them, constantly demonstrating that their manipulation tactics work perfectly and willingly handing over the remote control to their own emotional state. By allowing an emotional parasite to strictly dictate their daily moods and absolute human value, the victim solidifies their position as obedient prey, making it absolutely critical to revoke this unearned power immediately. Pause the video and deeply internalize the gravity of the behavioral trap currently being exposed, as your desperate need for validation is actively destroying your potential for future success at this exact moment. If you fail to completely decode this specific psychological exploit within the next 60 seconds, your sovereign identity will be permanently erased by manipulators who already recognize your biological fear. The narrow window of opportunity to protect your nervous system and establish an unbreakable mental framework is shutting right now, making it critical that you absorb this clinical data without a single distraction. Severe cost of seeking social validation. The severe biological and psychological cost of constantly seeking social validation is absolutely catastrophic, functioning as a fatal energetic leak that systematically destroys an individual's internal foundation over a prolonged period of time. Every single time true thoughts are suppressed to maintain a fraudulent peace, and every time a toxic insult is swallowed without physical resistance, the brain chemistry registers a severe internal trauma. This continuous suppression causes cortisol levels to permanently spike, keeping the central nervous system highly inflamed and trapping the individual in an exhausting, endless state of survival where kinetic energy is never successfully released. Because the deep anger associated with having one's boundaries violated is repeatedly suppressed to avoid conflict, that trapped emotional energy eventually turns completely toxic, aggressively rotting the individual's self-esteem from the absolute core outward. This highly destructive behavioral pattern inevitably breeds a silent, heavy resentment toward the entire social circle, leading the individual to secretly despise the very same people they are so desperately attempting to accommodate. Chronic exhaustion sets in for absolutely no logical reason. accompanied by a severe, unbreakable brain fog that clouds all rational thinking and permanently extinguishes any lingering traces of personal ambition or drive. Covert narcissist relies entirely on this psychological destruction to maintain their dominance, slowly overwriting the target's concrete memories and core values until the victim begins to deeply question their own basic sanity. Existence is gradually reduced to serving the chaotic, toxic emotional fluctuations of the parasite, creating a horrifying state of clinical biological slavery that is perfectly disguised to the outside world as a supportive friendship, fake kindness, and the desperate attempt to be universally liked violently destroy long-term physical health, causing the individual's posture to collapse under the invisible weight and stripping their speaking voice of its natural resonance. Begging for cheap social approval is a slow, agonizing, completely silent death where valuable life force is the exact currency used to purchase temporary comfort for predators, meaning the heavy energy vault must be closed forever. Why elite operators never chase approval. The elite top 1% operate on a completely different psychological frequency, possessing an impenetrable mental defense system that fundamentally and entirely rejects the pathetic identity of the accommodating people pleaser. These sovereign operators have ruthlessly purged the biological need for external validation from their nervous systems, understanding perfectly that relying on the approval of others is the fastest mathematical route to losing absolute power. When covert manipulators inevitably attempt their calculated public dominance tests, the elite operator does not panic, flinch, or rush to fix the uncomfortable social tension with a friendly, submissive smile. Instead, they execute a terrifying, unblinking cold stillness with absolute precision, allowing the heavy, uncomfortable silence to hang thickly in the air and forcing the predator to suffocate entirely within their own manufactured disrespect. Predator fully expected a weak, compliant smile and an eager attempt to smooth over the friction. But instead, their toxic tactics collided violently with an unbreakable concrete wall of emotional discipline. Firm boundaries are never apologized for by the truly elite, and negotiations with emotional terrorists simply do not happen, allowing these operators to command entire rooms without ever needing to raise their speaking voices. By strictly dictating the exact terms of engagement and owning their internal reality completely, the elite demonstrate that being universally liked is a cheap, utterly useless metric compared to being completely and undeniably respected. Playing the dark villain and being deeply misunderstood by fools is entirely comfortable for those who hold true leverage, because they understand that free emotional energy cannot be extracted from a stone. Parasites avoid elite operators like the absolute plague, because they recognize that any attempt at manipulation will be crushed immediately, making it absolutely essential for you to adopt this exact mental framework today. You are standing at the absolute edge of a psychological paradigm shift, and the behavioral armor being handed to you today is the only mechanism capable of protecting your life force from extraction. If you close this video before mastering this final execution step, you will wake up tomorrow as obedient prey, permanently volunteering to remain a pathetic social puppet for the rest of your existence. The elite guard this specific secret incredibly ruthlessly to maintain their dominance over the masses, so do not miss the following clinical instructions if you ever intend to reclaim your absolute social leverage. Reclaiming your absolute social power today. The era of existing as obedient, silent prey ends the moment you decide that reclaiming your absolute social power requires ruthless, immediate physical execution rather than passive intellectual understanding. The nervous, accommodating social smile must be permanently deleted from your behavioral repertoire today, effectively terminating the constant, pathetic desire for fake peace that has kept you anchored to the bottom of the hierarchy. When blatant, disrespectful insults are directed at you in a public setting, you must mentally step aside and allow the heavy social tension to crash loudly, absolutely refusing to fix the awkwardness yourself. By looking directly at the manipulator with completely cold, dead eyes and projecting the quiet stillness of an apex predator, you instantly reverse the psychological attack and reclaim your sovereign authority over the environment. You must accept the brutal reality that reclaiming your power will inevitably cause massive, violent anger among your social circle, prompting emotional parasites to throw severe, toxic tantrums as their primary food source disappears. You will be loudly accused of extreme selfishness, and cold, arrogant behavior will be desperately claimed by those who previously benefited from your lack of boundaries, but you must let them scream wildly in the dark. Their deep, helpless frustration as they thrash on the cold floor is the absolute clinical proof that your new mental armor works perfectly, demonstrating that you no longer require their pathetic permission to exist. The highly toxic sponge identity is completely dead, replaced today by a massive, impenetrable concrete wall that protects your internal energy vault fiercely from anyone attempting to extract your valuable life force. Subscribe and hit the bell immediately to join the ranks of the truly armed elite operators, mastering the heavy power of silence to become utterly untouchable in any highly toxic social environment. Discover the exact biological signs that are currently attracting narcissists into your life by clicking the video on the screen right now, and evolve your mind today so you can completely dominate the hierarchy tomorrow.